To be honest, I can't believe I'm about to talk about this. So I guess be prepared for a vulnerable share. However, as you know, I'm good at like sharing stuff about myself. I think over the time I've become self-conscious of that, and like I've been feeling really freaking weird. I feel like I've been in like these portals of time that have been like dimensionally shifting and rapidly like changing it and expanding it. Like, oh my God, I've been feeling weird. Number one, I'm curious, is it just me that's been feeling weird? And I think it is, because I've had all these revelations and all these realizations. Like, it has just been massive. Like, dark night of the soul, I'm like, yeah, I've been in it, definitely. So say hi when you're here. Let me know you're here. I'm going to bring up these comments here, and I'm going to share this as always. Yeah, Deanne's been feeling weird as well. Okay, good. It's not just me. I do have some pretty big sort of revelations, and at the same time when I'm always like, oh, so I think it's just me, and I think that what I'm going through is just what I'm going through, because I have all these realizations about my life, and I'm like, oh, well, this is what it is then, right? But at the same time, you know, and this is part of the thing, at the same time, I used to just share all the feelings, and everyone would be like, yeah, me too. And so I'd be like, oh, well, it's a collective thing. It's a collective wave. Like, that's what I used to do. Like, when I first came online, that's all I used to do, right? And I was like always on point, because it would be like what I was feeling. And then I'd be like, oh, well, this is what the collective's feeling. It's kind of weird, right? But it's a thing. And so a lot of people were feeling it at the same time. And then over the years, I've lost that confidence in myself. I've lost the confidence in myself. I've lost what I'm doing. Like, it's kind of really weird. And to be honest, I feel like I've been losing my mind a little bit, but I've been like, I kind of understand what's been going on with that. And that's what I'm about to share with you guys, because I want to say the revelations and the realizations about it, I'm trying not to cry, but I think that I've really understood what's going on. Is because if you saw you've been following me for a few months, like, I'm like, who am I without my trauma? And, you know, that's all I used to talk about, right? It was like, you know, I would talk about, you know, the narcissistic ex that I used to be with, and like talk about all these things and the relationships. And I was like, well, I don't want to talk about that stuff anymore. And then I'm like, well, what do I talk about if I'm not talking about that? I'm like, who am I without my trauma? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's been this huge, big revelation, big realization, big change that I've been going through. And then like today, the penny has dropped. Like, I just want to say, like, for the last 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, the pennies keep dropping. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, this is crazy. But not, but is, but So I really want to share this, and I'm sharing this from the perspective that we're also stepping into ear chakra consciousness. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Hannah. Welcome. If this is your first time to my live stream, please comment below and let me know where you're from in the world. If you're watching the replay, please comment replay below, and I would love to hear from you. I do come back to the comments eventually. So yeah, who am I without my trauma? There's been other revelations about this, but this is deep in ear chakra consciousness, because let me share this. I'm already starting to talk, but I want to talk about what I'm about to share. Talking about me, I want to refer it to the ear chakra consciousness, because it is. And I see, Lee, you say it feels like you're losing your mind sometimes too. Yeah, and I wanted to speak about this, right? It is a couch I'm sitting on, like, oh my God, right? And so, like, you know, like the losing my mind part, like, you know, I've been questioning, hang on a sec, I'm talking again. Let me just share this, because there's so many other things I want to say, blah, 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 blah. Wait a minute. Okay, there's a lot of people here for the first time. Okay, so welcome. So, okay, just hang on a second. I'll just keep talking. Wait a minute, Hannah. Okay. Let's have a look here. Oh, I see I did this thing again. Wait on. Gotta concentrate. Here we go. Figured it out, who I'm interacting with, and now I can share it as Hannah. No! Will it let me? There we go. Okay, got it. And to be honest, I've been sitting here for a little bit going, should I go live and talk about this? And this is part of the thing. This is part of the thing that I'm like, where's Hannah gone? And when I say this, it's more about like, and I know the truth of it is that I'm shifting to the person without my trauma. When I say like, I don't feel confident in talking about everything that I used to talk about and I used to be so confident in, I know it's because there's been a break and a shift right down the center, if you may. Let alone the world stuff that is like, you know, on top of things, of course. But I feel like in myself, the shell of trauma that I've been living in, only know my life to be, running from that place, like running from adrenaline from that place, like that, I know, like that trauma shell has shattered. And so I've been trying to remember the things that I love. And it's not like I'll be sitting here like trying to remember what I love. It's just been like this massive process. And as I was saying before, like I'm relating this to the ear chakra consciousness because it is very much what it is about, right? It's very much about, you know, like if we really think about ear chakra consciousness, is it on the planet yet? Number one, is it on the planet yet? I'm curious, guys, like is ear chakra consciousness on the freaking planet yet? Like, I don't know. Is it? Tell me. I'm waiting. Just tell me. Oh, I didn't bring up comments here. Some of them come up. Lockdown life. Lockdown life's gotta suck. I'm sorry. I wouldn't be coping. And that's the thing. I'm not coping where I am. Lee says, yeah, that's what it feels like for me too. Like my old shell is crumbling. Yeah, it is definitely what's happening. So I think as well, like, and I'm just making sure this is on silent and I'm bringing this up here. Okay, comments. So the ear chakra consciousness is not on the planet yet. Now I want to say I've been feeling resistant to bringing the ear chakra consciousness to earth. Big part of my purpose and big part of a lot of people's life purpose is that it's not on the planet yet. And that's why a lot of people have trouble trusting their intuition to be able to bring forth something that's not on the planet yet, right? These big, crazy out there ideas, they're yours, baby, for a reason, right? And I feel like, all right, what I'm about to talk about goes pretty personal. I'm even nervous to share about stuff like this. And it's so weird because, again, I never used to be, right? I never used to be. I just used to talk and do all these things. And I've been trying to question, well, I've been questioning and I'm like, why aren't I like I used to be? Why aren't I this person? Like, why, like, and it's been kind of driving me insane. And I'm like, maybe I should just be that person again, right? And I'm like, okay, cool, let's be that person. It'll last like 5 minutes. And then I'm just like, ugh. Now, there's a few things that have happened that have really reminded me, especially this week, and you can see through my posts, right? And I really like recalibrated. I've been recalibrating my business, been recalibrating how I work. I've been recalibrating my entire freaking life. And a big part of that is, as you guys have known, I'm really working on that question of like, who am I without my trauma? If that's all I've known to be, and then all of a sudden I've kind of hit this point, right? Because I think a lot of us have had trauma in our life, right? In some way, shape or form. And we do healing work to heal that. That's what the point of healing work is for, right? In whatever which way, shape or form you do. And then it gets to a point, it's like, okay, cool, right? You've healed that. So now who are you? And now what do you do? And I think when we hit a point, there's a very definite point where we're like, wow, all of those old paradigms and all of the ways that I used to behave and the way that I used to feel, they just don't fit anymore. I think we try and fit into that mold and we're just like, or everything is just like, yeah. And it's like, because it's not sustainable. It's like our soul hasn't kind of dropped in, right? And this is a big part of what soul calling is about, which is the awakening of your life purpose. This is ear chakra consciousness, right? Which starts on the 22nd of September. The link is in my bio. And this is like everything that I live through is what I teach. Like this is pure, like I want to say that the reason that I've taken so long to land the ear chakra consciousness is, number one, it's not on the planet. Number two, I've had to recalibrate and go through the biggest recalibration to be able to receive the truth about ear chakra consciousness, to be able to embody it, to be able to deliver it. Like, I feel like that is the why in a way. At the same time, it feels like this huge piece for me around, you know, like things happening in the world, of course, around being censored on platforms, like I know I have as well, like, and I've just kind of like, I want to say I've just shut down as well. And I'm nervous to say this bit, but I feel like living out on 250 acres is driving me insane. Now, when I first moved out there, what I'm about to say is probably going to sound insane for some people, but so where I live is just outside, it's just outside the 5G thing, right? This is going to sound utterly crazy. Is it the 5G? Is it just freaking needing people, right? I went through a phase where I was just like, get me away from all these people. And now I'm like, wow, I actually really love people. It's kind of interesting. Maybe I needed to experience that, right? Maybe the ear chakra consciousness needed that space to recalibrate for me to face this stuff. Like, I've faced so much of being alone and what isolation really does. Now I know that, you know, you might be going, well, honey, you're not in lockdown, you're not in Melbourne, you're not in all these places around the world that have had like intense lockdowns. And I'm like, yeah, no, I escaped that for a freaking reason. And then the universe put me in a place where I'm isolated. And it might not sound like it because, well, you got all this beautiful nature around you and you got 250 acres. And it's like, at the same time, you know, when we just come off a 5 to 6 month road trip and, you know, we're driving for like, I'm driving, there's someone else, my daughter can't drive yet. I'm driving like 2 days straight at times and covering long distances, and I freaking loved it. Like, I love it. At the same time, it was like driving didn't seem anything to me, you know, like some people have said to me, they're like, how did you do all that driving? Like, I'm exhausted just driving this little bit. And I'm like, I don't know, I just get in the zone. How have I created whatever I have online? How have I created my business? How have I done whatever I've done in my life? I don't know, I've just done it. I've just created it. This is ear chakra consciousness. We create realities, the awakening of your life purpose, right? When we think about ears as the ear chakra, it's like a flower and it's been shut down for eons. The current spirituality on the planet is 7 dimensions, is 7 spheres, is 7 chakras. The 8th, number 1, brings the 7 into balance. It's an 8. It's a balanced paradigm. It's not a one lopsided paradigm, which is what we've been experiencing on the planet for a very long time. Power over control and the domination and all the stuff that's happening right now on the planet is because she's like, no, this is enough. The ear chakras is a very feminine opening to receive. It's a very lush, it's a very gentle, it's a very freaking powerful of creating entirely new paradigms, entirely new realities. And I feel like that's why a lot of us have been losing our mind, right? Some might say, oh, it's because of all the world stuff. Oh, it's because of all the technology. I'm like, probably, maybe. Or is it that reality is literally shifting and energetics and paradigms of how we used to even function are also changing? Because if we really think about a new world, not the new world order, the new world, right? If we really think about New Earth, sorry, that's what everyone calls it, New Earth. It's this beautiful heart space, beautiful, everybody's connected. Like, do you think people are just gonna shift into that? Like, no, they probably need a bit of a prod, which is what's happening on the planet right now, right? People don't just change their reality usually unless they have a big drive and a willingness to do it, right? There's gotta be some sort of definite reason for them to do that, right? So a big piece of that, you know, and like I said, I'm scared to even talk about this, but being out there, like, and I realized it, I don't know, it would have been about 8 months or so into living out there, and now, you know, in all this space, like, it's beautiful. I love the land. I love the quiet. I love the serenity. But I've also realized that I love human interaction, right? I'm already on my own with no family around. Like, just being around humans is something I've discovered it's a need, right? Where I actually want it now because I didn't want it before. And so it was like, 8 months into living out there, and I went surfing, and it was a Sunday morning, and I just drove to Coolum, and before I left, I put my board in the car, and I was like, I'm just gonna get a coffee before I leave. And I walked across the road, and like someone in the car park, it's busy, it's a Sunday morning at Coolum, and they're like, this person's like, good morning, and this other person was like crossing the road, he's like, good morning, and I'm like, oh, there's people here. It was a really like interesting wake up for me, and then like I ordered coffee, and there's all these people waiting with their dogs and their kids, and like people talking to me, and I'm like, oh my God, like I forgot about humans. I know this sounds a little bit weird, and if you're listening to me for the first time, you're probably like, what the hell is she going on about? So in my realizations of understanding that it is a very isolating thing living out there, let alone the fact that, like for me, moving out there was a reprieve to my empath system. Like I felt like my whole empath body could breathe, because after living in, technology and living in suburbia for a long time, like going out there was like, oh, my whole system can breathe. And then like, I don't know if I'm going through a detox of it or something like that. Maybe, it's just been over 12 months now. And it's kind of like, I really, really, really notice the difference now when I go into town and there's all the 5G. Like, it's not like I feel the line, although I haven't really been conscious of it. But when I've been walking around the shops and the city and, all sorts of things, well, not really city, but it's like a city. It's the closest to a city, but it's not Melbourne or Brisbane, really. There's people and there's shops and there's houses, maybe. I don't know, does that class as city? Anyway, whatever. I really noticed the energetic difference. Now, I've been drawn, hi beautiful people joining me, I've been drawn to watching a lot of things on time over this past maybe 18 months. I've been shown many things about nanotechnology, about time travel, about time portals, about time parallels, about all these things. And little did I realize, I'm like, oh, of course, because this is ear chakra consciousness. Ear chakra consciousness is literally connects worlds. It's literally like the understanding that time is now, and that there is no separation between the past and the future and right now. And it's so hard for our logical mind to even understand and comprehend, because we have been raised through society to just we're not taught that. We're taught something that keeps us in the past and in the present, in the past and in the future, but not very much in the present, right? And in the present is where the power is, as they always say. However, not many of us know how to use that power portal of the present. And if you saw my post yesterday around like Jasmine and just like the sense, it's a feeling. It's a feeling, and it's so interesting. In the Shadow of the Archangels, I just channeled through Archangel Raziel, and Archangel Raziel's shadow, so we're integrating the light and the dark, right? He's all about transformation, right? He transforms base metal to gold. He's the alchemist. He transforms darkness to light. And so the message that came through this morning around Archangel Raziel's transformation is literally like the place in between. It's, and we really think about it's the place in between. So if we really think about the place in between the past and the future, it's now. But then if there's a place in between the past and the future, then there is only now. Like, it's so hard to wrap our minds around, right? And I guess that's why, we don't. We just live in this reality of what we feel in this moment, and we just still stuck in the past and the future because of feelings that keep us trapped on the timeline. It's deep. This is very much ear chakra consciousness. So something very synchronistic has happened because I've realized that being out there is beautiful. I'm also, as you've probably seen, I have also been craving the ocean. I've missed the ocean, and a couple of massive things have dropped in about this. Leanne says, present moment has been so strong for me lately. It's just, and this is ears, it's so ear chakra consciousness, right? So we start our 5-week training of the ear chakra consciousness on the 22nd of September. And we're doing a 5-week live training. There'll be 3 live trainings a week. And I'm really excited about doing it live, rather than pre-recording it and then, you guys watching it, because I've been teaching Trust Intuition as a 16-week live training, 15, 16 week. And is phenomenal, right? I'm loving it. I'm loving teaching you live each week, right? Those of you who are in Trust Intuition know. And it's just like, man, the stuff that's channeling through, but is so relevant to what consciousness, like what humans are going through on a conscious level right now and an unconscious level. I'm just like, oh man, of course this is what's coming through. So I'm really excited about teaching the ear chakra consciousness starting on the 22nd of September. Link is in the title of this live stream, where you can send me a message for it, or you can find it on my page or my website. So, okay, so the present moment, right? And this is a thing. And so when we think about ears, they're pink, right? They're pink. It's very soft. Archangel Mary's been very strong as well, but she's very much that unconditional love. It is that openness. It is the softness, right? When I talk about the chakras and we go through the chakra journey, even the crown chakra is more more feminine. It opens. This is masculine. These are feminine. This is masculine. This is feminine. Solar plexus is masculine. Sacral is feminine. Base chakra is masculine. Even though each chakra has, you know, both masculine and feminine aspects, each chakra in the sense of the body has more of a masculine or feminine stance, right? And if you think about that, without the ears, it's a more masculine dominated base, right? And so when we bring the ears into the equation, it balances it out. And I feel like this is the big cause for what is happening on the planet right now. Like there needs to be a wake up to people hearing the truth rather than hearing what they're being fed. And that's only a matter of time, right? Only a matter of time. Interesting. So this is kind of interesting coming back to this time sense. All right, so let me drop back into what I personally realized. So my whole craving for the ocean, I freaking love the ocean. And some people might say, well, of course, Hannah, it's freaking beautiful. And I'm like, but I'm a mermaid and I have this deep affinity with it. And I realized this the other week, I'm like, this is the second time I've been pulled away from the ocean like this to face some really deep stuff. Now, I've been like looking at houses to move back near the ocean, blah, 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 blah. But then something dawned on me maybe about 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, I can't remember what it was, right? But I ended up asking my mum. I was just like, you know, because she used to live out in the bush. Like I was born in the middle of the outback in Broken Hill, New South Wales, in the middle of nowhere. Like it's in the middle of Australia in the red dirt. Almost the middle, but it might as well be the middle because it's like the middle. and she, you know, that's where I was born, and you know, I was there for the first 2 years of my life. Then we moved into town, and then I moved to Perth in Western Australia. And I said to Mum the other day, I was just like, you know, when you were out there, because obviously her family, my mum's side of the family, is in Perth, and that's where she grew up. But then she raised me for the first few years of my life in Broken Hill with my dad. And I said to her, I was just like, did you ever miss the ocean? Like when you were out in the bush, like did you? And she's like, oh, every day. She's like, I would see, well, I don't know if she said every day. She said always, all the time, every day. You know, she said, if I'd see a photo of someone at the beach, she'd be like, oh. And even now she lives, you know, a bit inland. And she says, even now I still know. I'm like, oh. And for me, I had a big realization. I was like, oh, is my craving and draw for the ocean because of the mother craving, like the mother healing? Now, I've always said that when I'm in the ocean, it feels like I'm being held. Before I learned to surf, I used to swim out the back, like when it was really big surf, like I would just swim out and I'd swim out, because when you get out past the big waves, well, it's calm out there. It's only in the breakwater that's the dangerous part, right? But I'd swim out the back and I would just be out there and I would dive down under the big waves, like just free dive. Like I would just dive down and just hold on to the sand on the bottom and just sit out there, like under the water, under the deep blue, and just hold onto the sand and just be under the water. Like I would do that all the time. Well, a lot of the time, right? Especially around my early 20s. And it was just something that I did. And then I learned to surf, and then just surfing, being out there in the surf, right? So, and I've always felt that the ocean just holds me. Now, I also know that I'm a mermaid, right? I call myself a mer angel. I'm half angel, half mermaid. Like that's, I just know that in myself. And I'm like, okay. And even when I worked in an aquarium store and I learned that, you know, I learned so much about water chemistry in the aquarium store. Like I learned more about water chemistry working in the aquarium store than I did at chemistry at school, because that went totally over my head. But working with aquarium and working with water chem, I learned so much, which was awesome. I loved working in the aquarium and all the different fish and around the world and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, what I found the most fascinating thing ever is that the pH of the ocean, because when you got a marine aquarium, you need to know the, you know, all the water chemistry to keep it correct, because people's fish always die. And I'm like, because they just don't understand or learn the pH, like the water chemistry, right? It's more than just the pH, but anyway, it's the chemistry, and just like our body. And so the most fascinating thing, still to this day, it blows my freaking mind, is that the pH of the ocean is the same pH as our blood. Like, the pH of the ocean is 8.3. Don't quote me, but I remember reading somewhere along the lines when I was learning all about raw food many years back, is that the pH of our blood is 8.3. When we eat an acidic diet, meaning junk food, processed food, animal foods, anything that's not natural state, basically, it lowers the acidity in our body. Now, our body is so freaking amazing that our body will draw calcium from our bones and put it around a protective, like, you know, protective wall around our arteries to keep our pH of our blood at 8.3, because it knows in an acidic body, our acidic body dies. How freaking amazing is our body? It will literally rather pull calcium out of our bones, because calcium raises the pH, right? So calcium raises the pH to 8.3. That's why there's coral in the ocean. That's why you never put a seashell into a fish tank unless that fish requires a high pH, because the pH goes up through the roof. It's amazing when that would happen, right? And it still blows me away to this day. And I guess in a blowing away space, I'm like, but why? Why is our blood the same pH as the ocean? But it kind of makes sense, because I feel amazing when I'm in the ocean. Like, honestly, who doesn't feel amazing at the ocean? Whether you're on the water, in the water, seeing the ocean, looking at the seaside, seeing photos of it, whatever, hearing it. Like, isn't it interesting that the sound of the ocean is the same sound that we hear when we are in our mother's womb? Because the breathing in and the breathing out, that sound is what we hear for 9 to 10 months when we're in the womb. Is that breathing in, breathing out. Same as the ocean, it's a wave. That sound, the ocean breath, is what we hear. Now, there's all these kind of connections, right? And then also that my mum craved the beach when she lived out in the bush too. And I was like, oh, okay, so maybe I'm meant to stay living out here in the bush, because maybe that's just a mum thing. That's a mum generational thing. Like, hey, maybe there is a bit of that, right? At the same time, I was like, oh, this is so interesting. It's the mother healing. I'm like, oh, well, here we are at the freaking ear chakras again, right? So in realizing that, I was like, oh, well, maybe it's just the mum stuff, and maybe that's just what I'm feeling. But then I've still been like, I've been struggling to get motivated. I mean, you know, and I think, and I know I've shared this before too, like out there in the bush, like in the hinterland, I should say, maybe in the desert too, I don't know. In the hinterland, it's like sometimes it'll be foggy, like thick fog and mist until like 10 a.m. in the morning. And it's not like it's warm, you know, especially in winter, it takes ages to warm up. And then there's a tiny bit of sun before it gets warm again. And I'm like, man, it's not why I moved back to Queensland. So what's been really interesting is that when I started realizing these things and actually allowing myself to desire what I want with no judgment, I've realized many things. So I've been looking around for houses, and I've been looking obviously at the ocean and things that I've looked at on the Sunshine Coast. I'm just like, oh, you know, I'm like, okay, maybe this one, maybe this one. And of course there's my daughter, so I'm always checking in with her. She's like, nah, don't like that one, nah. And then I'm like, oh, fuck's sake, okay, whatever. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll just leave it for another week. I was like, whatever. So I'm just keeping my eye on it. And again, I don't even remember how it happened. And I was like, for some reason, and I actually, because we went and looked at a house, and I was like, but what about this one? You know, and we went and walked along the beach, because it was on the beach. on the beachfront, and I was like, so this is where the entrance would be, it's behind the bushes, blah, blah, blah. And she said, nah. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. She's like, I don't like it. And I was like, okay. And I was just so frustrated. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll just let it go. I was just like, you know, and I got so angry, and we're walking on the beach, and she's like walking up there, and it's windy and blowing a gale. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's just not the right house. And I'm like, just let it go, Hannah. And I said that to her. I'm like, maybe it's just not our house, right? And so I've just let it go. And then I'm like, oh, well, maybe this moving thing is just, you know, me running away from stuff, and I just need to sit my ass down and do the work and whatever. And it's not like I haven't been, but at the same time, I'm like, why have I been feeling like I've been losing my mind? Why haven't I been feeling like, you know, it's kind of interesting. Like, it's interesting and weird. And I'm just, you know, I'm like, okay, something massive is shifting. Like, I literally have been placed out there for a reason. When I was placed in a place many years ago without the ocean was when I moved to Brisbane. So when I had my spiritual awakening when I was 21, I lived on the ocean. I did say to myself I would never move from that unit. However, I did. And I moved to Brisbane. In Brisbane City, there's you know, water, but it's not an ocean, because there's the big islands off the coast. And I was in Brisbane for 18 months, and I had really big shifts, and I faced a lot of stuff that the ocean was like an addiction for me. It was a cover up, if you may. I lived on the ocean, so I was there every day. It was my nurturer, it was my fixer. It fixed everything, right? I don't know anyone who doesn't go in the ocean and they don't feel fixed. They feel healed, right? So in Brisbane, I faced a lot of stuff. I feel like out here, I'm definitely facing a lot of stuff as well. Now, as you've seen in my post recently, it's very much about remembering what I love, remembering who I am. And I feel like this ear chakra consciousness, the ear chakra consciousness is number one, not yet on the planet. The ear chakra consciousness is your beautiful, divine, feminine self. Whether you're male or female, the feminine is your intuition. And for eons, our intuition has been shut down on the friggin' planet. We have forgotten who we are. Intuition is our natural state of being. We are highly creative souls. We are so damn freaking powerful that we understand interdimensional travel. We understand not just, it's like beyond manifestation, because it's our natural state of being. I want to say it's creation. It's a creation point. We are constantly creating. We are constantly in the movement of pure and utter creation, of desire, of flow, of soul, of all these things. Like, this is the new earth. This is our natural state. This is the 5D, right? I'm doing this because it's like such a like, oh, like we're going to get back to 5D. And I'm like, yeah, because it's our freaking natural state. And do you know what? It's because it's our freaking ears that needs to reopen, like, and stop being asleep from the ears, because that is what was shut down. When the human history, when we got invaded originally, and then we were led way back when by narcissists, which is like what's on the planet right now, it's like this got shut down. We stopped listening to ourselves and we listened to them, right? We stopped being open. When we stopped being open, we forgot who we were. We've turned into robots. People worried about people turning into robots today. I'm like, man, we already are. What are you talking about? We're already freaking robots. But when we open back and we open our ears and we hear ourselves, we hear our soul, we hear the truth, we hear what is important to us, we remember who we are. We remember our purpose. We remember what we came for. We remember what we're here to do. Why? Because the ears, the heart, and the base are so interconnected. The ears, the heart, and the base automatically align. The ears and the heart and the base is what really draws it home. I think this is why I'm doing a full detox to clear out and open the channel. Yeah, 100%. And totally remembering all the things. And this is the thing, we are waking up. So many people are focusing on the people that are asleep and all the things happening. I'm like, there's so many people who are waking up. There's so many people who are waking up right now, including yourself. You're probably waking up to different layers of reality that are like, oh, that's a bit hard to face right now. I'm like, I don't know, but I know I gotta do this, but oh my God, this is so hard, because you're facing yourself for the very first time. And I think this is why I've been struggling, because I'm like, I'm out there all by myself on 250 acres. I have to face myself. Get into the fucking ocean. Can I just have another coffee? I don't know. Let me sleep. I don't know. It's too foggy and it's too cold and I don't want to go on live stream because I look like shit, because I feel like shit, because I got nothing. I got no one out here. I'm like, I'm going insane. Oh, my cats. I'm like, oh my God, how did I end up with 9 cats? I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, really? Or like, how the fuck did I turn into the crazy psychic cat lady? Like, for real? Fucking, what has happened to my life? Like, no fucking joke, like, for real, but. And I'm like, I think I'm going insane. Get me out of here. I'm done. I got the lessons. I'm out. Oh my God. Facing off with myself every freaking day. Exactly. Exactly. I'm like, how did I end up here? How did I end up with 9 freaking cats, man? Like, for serious. I love you guys, but for serious, like, I'm like, I even like justify myself, and I'm like, Hannah, they don't care how you justify yourself. You're just a crazy cat lady, so don't even waste your voice on that. For serious, but welcome to ear chakra consciousness. At the ear chakra consciousness, there is also a lot of light. Even though there's a lot of darkness, it feels like we're going through a dark night of the soul because we're facing a reality that we're not the old person, we're not the new person yet. We're in the middle somewhere, but we still actually don't know who we are. Because that person without all the childhood trauma, that person that has been running on all these roles, these, you know, like literally like family system roles, like the scapegoat or the caretaker or the people pleaser or the comedian or the superhero, or, you know, there's all these different roles in the family system. Those are disintegrating right now. These are obliterating right now for human consciousness, and this is why people feel like they're losing their mind. Because these roles are no longer valid for the 5D new earth, i.e. returning to the truth of who we are. Now the reality is that there is a lot of light, but the I want to say the key, if you want a big secret to the ear chakra consciousness, that's not really a secret, but the big key to letting in the light, do you know what the key is? It is trusting yourself. We've stopped trusting ourselves. Yes, that's solar plexus. That's where we trust our intuition, is at the solar plexus. But we've stopped trusting ourselves because things that we heard were not nice. Because we're so sensitive, we shut down. We're like, oh, that was a bit harsh. It's like, oh, and then we get accustomed to harsh. And then on all our devices and our shows and everything is very quite harsh. And we're just desensitized to it. But then we're listening to it all. And then we're listening to other people. And so like, we shut down the light. If you want, the fastest way to let the light back into your life is to trust yourself. And the thing is that when we open our ears, when we really face the truth and the reality of who we are, because at the crown, we're open to spirit, we're open to angels, we're open to changing our life, we're open to, oh my God, this is so amazing. And then we're like, whoop, hit reality, third eye chakra consciousness, and we're just like, whoa, family systems, truth, things that are under the carpet, all the stuff in the world. And we're just like, oh my God, this reality sucks. Balls. A lot of people get stuck at third eye chakra. Got itchy hair stuff. A lot of people get stuck at third eye chakra because it's a harsh reality to face. It's a harsh truth to face. But when we shift down to here, we're still facing the third eye chakra consciousness stuff, but we're also feeling even more lost in a way because we're like, but who am I without my trauma and my family system? Like, who am I without that? Because that's what everyone has on the planet. And somehow I need to create, like I need to be, active in there. I somehow need to be in the family system, but how do I even do that, right? And so trusting yourself is the fastest way to letting in the light into your life. And do you know what that does? When you trust, you open, your heart opens, your base opens, which is where your base opens, that's where the trust is, that's where it originally sits, right? But we trust in all chakras, of course. We trust what we see, we trust what we feel, etc. We trust what we say. when we open to the light and we open to the truth and we open and we let in the light, this brings the light to the darkest aspects of humanity, which is our throat. The throat chakra is big on shadow work. It's the deepest, darkest place in humanity. So many people have been shut off in their voice. What they say is not important. I'm not hearing you. I'm not listening to you. And so you stop speaking. But the throat, when we can open ourselves to the light and trust ourselves, it brings light to here. And it fuels us to live our truth, because it's not just speaking our truth at the throat. It's also embodying it, it's living it. And sometimes when we're here, we're like, what do I always say? When we work on one chakra, the next chakra opens. And sometimes we're like, wow, this is really hard to face, because I see how much I'm living out of integrity in my life. I see and feel and hear, like when I really tap into the interdimensional reality, when I really let into the light, when I let the light into my life and I step into the light, I realize how much I'm living in the darkness. I realize how much I'm living out of integrity, out of my own life. I want all these things and my dreams and my visions and all these things, but they're not here yet. And I see that I'm actually not doing the things to get me forward to go where I'm meant to go, or I'm deeply living out of alignment of what's true for me because I'm not listening to my intuition. I'm out of integrity. I'm shutting my own heart down. No wonder I'm depressed. Trust, trust, trust. Lee says, oh shit. Yeah. Yep. That's my biggest thing at the moment, trusting what's coming through. Yeah, you just have to trust. Because the harshest thing to face is how much we're not living in integrity in our life. That's when we'll go into projection. That's when we'll go into blame. That's when it's them this and that and that. And that's when we stay in that victim mode. I hate that word, but it's how it happens. Because we know deep down we're out of integrity with how we're supposed to be living. But we're also not taking action on that. And some people will be like, but I don't know how. And I'm like, well, I didn't know how I was going to build this business. I didn't know how I was going to get on a road trip and survive for 5 months. I didn't know how I was going to do work on the road and do. I didn't know how I was going to get the house that I do now. I didn't know how I was going to. But I trusted. And I took a leap and I did it anyway because I'm hearing. And when we understand is that when we're closed here, we only see this reality right now. That's all there is. There's only right now, this little blind reality. Then when we open, all of a sudden there's all these interdimensional realms and these other worlds. And we're confronted because we're like, fuck, what am I doing choosing this reality? When all I have to do is like choose this one? Duh. And then we have all the feelings come up because it's like, well, actually, how come I didn't see that before? How come I didn't do that before? How come blah, blah, blah? Like, well, yeah, I could have just packed up and moved and just, there's a simple choice. And I want to say to this, sometimes there's a divine timing. Sometimes we need to realize certain things before the doors will open. There's a difference between sabotaging when there's an open door, and there's a difference between when there's just blank door, blank door, blank door, blank door. Oh, fuck, here's the open door, go. It's a bit like when we've been looking for a house. I'm like, Dave's like, no. Shouldn't say no to all of them, but it's kind of like, it's kind of like, hey, what about this? Like, it's like, and I would just be like, Hannah, just stay here. It's fine. Just stay here. Just stay here. Look at this amazing place you've got. Look, the world's going into chaos and lockdown. Like, look what the place you've got. It's amazing. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on like that. And I still doubt myself at times, but I'm like, when I trust myself, when I step into the light, I'm like, do I live here? No. I'm done with the snakes. I'm done with the ticks. I'm done with the 45-minute drive into town. I realized not long ago, I'm like, it's a choice to live with the ticks. It's a choice to live with the snakes. It's a choice to live 45 minutes out of fucking town, for fuck's sake. I'm choosing this. Don't fucking whinge about it, for goodness sake. For goodness sake. For goodness sake. Lee says, talking straight to me, I'm sure of it. So glad I tuned in. Nick says, loving this, Hannah. Yes, there's a message for some of you. For those who needed to hear it, it's here. Dawn says, my third eye vibrates all the time and I feel like I dismiss it a lot. Yeah, so when you feel your third eye vibrating, it can be like, when you feel your third eye vibrating, it's a couple of things. You need to tune in what it is for you, right? It can be like, you know how sometimes you get goosebumps or truth bumps when you tap into truth and you're just like, oh, that was truth, or something I said is truth, or someone else said something and it like, or you felt it, right? It's like, whoa, that was truth. Sometimes that can be that. Sometimes the vibrating in the third eye can be like, you know, when you go to get acupuncture and they put the needles in, and that's because there's lines of energy, like there's lines of blood, right? The arteries, there's lines of energy that run through, and sometimes they can get blocked. And so when you get an acupuncture needle, it goes in there, so it opens up the channel again, right? If you're doing yoga and you're holding a pose and you're shaking in the pose, it's because these things are opening up again, right? So sometimes the vibrating can be it opening, yeah? It's shifting out the energy as it's opening. Sometimes it can be a message. Sometimes what you're thinking about was just, it's like, are you listening to this, yeah? So tune in to what it is for you, and you can always ask, what do you mean when you're talking to me, be you your vibration? Something like that. I don't know, you just say, is there a message for me? Can you talk to me? Like, build a relationship with it. It's like a friend. Doreen says, I feel like you're talking directly to me as well. Yes. So the last little important point that I want to share on this live stream is because, and this is a personal realization again, I don't even remember how it came up. Actually, there was two things that came up, and I'm like, and it wasn't because of them. It was just like, oh, there's life down here. Oh, that's right. This is before it's life down here. So Adaya and I went into town the other day to get dinner or something. I think it was when we were looking at that last house actually. And like we're driving back, and I was like, not pissed off. I was just disappointed. I was just like, oh, it's not that house, whatever. So it's like, fuck. But whatever. It's just like, I don't know if am I fucking wasting time? Like I just wasted all afternoon again because it takes 45 minutes to drive in, and then you do your thing and you drive back, and I'm like, the whole day's gone. It feels like. Anyway, time. The other thing I realized, time is really important to me. When we're at the ear chakra consciousness, we're talking about timelines, collapsing timelines, no time, interdimensional reality, no time, out of time, changing, reconfiguring codes out of time, like very much about time and interdimensional reality, and generational clearing is all ear chakra consciousness, right? Obviously feminine, receiving love, opening, fertility, oh my goodness, fertility issues at the ears, because the ears even look like the ovaries. If we're closed here, we're gonna be closed here, I ain't gonna receive shit, right? So when we're driving home the other day after we were looking at the house, it was like, I think it might have been a Saturday afternoon, and we were like, and I was like, oh, there's people on the balcony. It was like, oh, there's people, like when you're out in the country, 45 minutes inland and on 250 acres, there's freaking no one but bush and trees and kangaroos and whatever, right? And so I'm like, it's Saturday afternoon. Of course, there's people having gatherings in Queensland, because I'm sure in other places there aren't, but it was happening. And then we're driving along, and then there's all these like limousines and like a wedding, and I'm like, oh, and it was like, this is gonna sound crazy. I'm like, oh my God, life is happening in here. Like, life is happening in here. I'm like, I'm choosing a reality that I'm freaking dying in out here, man. Like, I love it, but long term, it is not serving me. I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm like, okay, it's time to come back to life, right? I feel like I've come out of the cocoon. I'm like, okay, I'm ready for the light. And I'm like, freaking how ear chakra consciousness is this, for goodness sake? Like, the tomb is awakening. Like, when I originally channeled the ear chakra consciousness a couple of years ago, the symbol that I got was, I didn't even know what it was. I just loved the picture. And then when I looked closer, it was literally a tomb. Like it was you know, like in the big Egyptian tombs, I guess, and you've got the tomb, it was the whole tomb thing, right? And it's a big hall or whatever. And it was literally that. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know that this is the ear chakra consciousness. And I'm like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense because everyone's been asleep. Like, it's been shut down for a long time, right? So I was like, well, that makes total sense. And I'm like, okay, like, shifting off the lid now, I'm coming back to life. Like, you know, it was like life is happening. And I know it sounds weird because I know a lot of people do live in the city and whatever, in suburbia, but it's definitely been an experience. And I just, it's been huge. It's been a huge realization. That wasn't the reason I was going to share that story. That wasn't the point. So it was from that I was like, life is happening here. There's weddings going on. There's people around. They're having barbecues on a Saturday afternoon. I'm like, oh, that's right. That's what people do, right? Like, what the hell? Like, I've just been in this zone, and I know I've been in a cocoon. I know I've been resting and replenishing. I know I've been healing my body. I know that I've needed that reprieve. Like, I know that. And it's also dissolved the masculine hard trauma shell from my body, that I don't need to be running anymore. I don't need to be on adrenaline anymore. I don't need to do all that, because going into Trisha says that's so interesting, right, Trisha? So this is the thing, because I used to not be able to handle it either. That's why I left. That's why I got in my car. That's why I went out there, all the pieces. Because Trisha says I'm so opposite. I go into town and I get irritated, and I go back out of town and I can't get home fast enough. So what I've realized in that is that it was because all my trauma was being irritated. All my agitation was coming from it stirring up everything in me that I wasn't willing to face. That was my realization, because now I've come back in and I'm like, wow, I actually love people. I actually want to be around them. My heart feels open to people now. Whereas in the past it was so closed, and I was so judgmental, and I was so like shut off from life because of all the hurt and all the pain and all the trauma and everything I've been through, and the betrayal and the relationship breakups and the kicking out of tribes and blah, 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 blah. Like, get me out of here, it's too painful to face. And I tell you what, in the last 18 months and on those road trips and being out there in isolation, like on 250 acres in beautiful nature isolation, I should say, like I've faced some pretty hard tears in the past 18 months. And it's been one hell of a face of the heart pain and how closed I actually became to life, and how controlling I became in relationships, being judgmental of people, being judgmental of groups of people, not being able to tolerate people, not being very closed-minded, like just, like this and they're doing that, and just controlling in general relationships and in intimate, like the whole thing. And it was because I'd shut off my heart that freaking much that it totally shut me off to life. And even though I feel like I've been dying out there, I just know that I'm ready to come back, because when I come back into town, I'm like, oh my God, I love people. I just love talking to people. Like, I just like talk to, and it's so interesting. So, okay. So anyway, that was the big piece about me, because I couldn't handle it either, but because it was all this was surfacing for me and I wasn't willing to face it, but universe made me face it, of course. So Leanne says, I live in a suburb where there was no signs of life, no noise in the neighborhood, no children playing, no noise, no music. I think it says no music or traffic. It was weird. And it's a popular suburb. Interesting. Because the places that I've been looking at are also like that. So I want quiet, but I want to be inconvenienced. Like for me, driving 45 minutes to the shop is an inconvenience one way, because I've got work to do. And a lot of things have been coming back to me that I've remembered about my purpose, that my soul freaking desires. And part of the private jets thing is not just because it's lush, not just because it's luxury, not just because it's fancy. It's because it saves time. Time is the most important thing to me. We sit in an airport for 3 to 4 hours waiting for the plane. We get on the plane, we sit on the tarmac for another hour to 2 hours before we take off. Then we land and we wait on the tarmac for another hour or so. Then we get off and it takes another 3 hours to get through the friggin' customs and everything. And then we've got to drive to our destination. With a private jet, you miss all of that. They pick you up from your house. They get you on the plane. You don't even need to do your custom stuff. They sort that for you. You fly there. They transport you. Like, I can be working the entire time. That was my why I wanted private jets, because time is so valuable to me. Very ear chakra consciousness. It's not about what we need. It's about what we want. It's about what's important to us. Because when we follow what we want, we're following the course of our destiny. We are following the course of our soul. I don't care if you don't like private jets. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying find your want. What do you want? Right? Lee says it's so weird in Melbourne, a city with people, but feels like bad sci-fi zombie movie. Imagine it would at the moment. Imagine it would. Yeah. Things are changing. There's no doubt about that for sure, right? And this is the thing, I'm like, oh, and so I guess part of that, coming to life stuff, like, I don't know how it came about. So it was like, we went to that house. It was like Saturday afternoon, saw the wedding, saw all the people. It's just like, oh my God, life, that's right. And then, so a couple other things then triggered it. I was like, oh, let's look for houses at the Gold Coast. I'm like, why haven't we looked at the Gold Coast? And then I was like, oh, why didn't I look at the Gold Coast? I'm like, oh, actually I did look at the Gold Coast when we first moved back from our road trip. I was looking at the Gold Coast, and it was just blocked door. It just wasn't right. Obviously, we needed to go up there, face all this stuff, and then come back, obviously. But anyway, we're looking around, and like, for what you get on the Gold Coast compared to on the Sunshine Coast, I was like, oh my God, why haven't we looked on the Gold Coast before? And the house that we actually found and loved and both fell in love with was actually around the corner from the first house where I actually gave birth to Adea. Well, I went to hospital, but she was born there. And I'm like, oh, this is significant. This is really significant. I didn't quite understand why. And then a couple of days kind of went past and more information dropped in. I was just like, wow, this is really significant. I've been asking, who am I without my trauma? So many things have unraveled from that. And then all of a sudden I found myself back in a house, or looking at houses, but the particular one that we found that we both fell in love with is around the corner from where we used to live. Now, I left that place originally because I literally, when she was 11 months old, she was 11, almost 12 months old, I literally packed up our unit. I think it was with 4 friends, came around early one morning, helped me pack up the house from start to finish. Within a couple of hours, the truck arrived, put it all in the truck, and we moved 2 hours north to escape a DV situation. And that's why we left. And when we talk about who am I without my trauma, and I've been running all my entire life. I've been literally on the run my entire life. And it's interesting that places on the coast haven't, like, yeah, sure they have, but then when we've looked at the Gold Coast, I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, it's just interesting. Now, whether we are going to move here, whether that actually happens, like I want to, because I feel like, I'm like, there is life here. And when I really think about before I had Adea, I was loving life here. I was rollerblading all the time. I was going to yoga all the time. I was holding angel circles. Like, I was working. I loved it. I'd run to the beach. I'm like, I loved it here. The only reason I left was because someone said, pack up, get out of the DV situation, because you never will. And so I did. And it's just interesting that that's unraveling in the whole thing, right? Now, what's even more interesting is that my whole mermaid self is like, oh my God, Gold Coast. The only thing that I see has changed is there's a bucket load of surveillance cameras, like, on every street. Not just the Gold Coast, like at Brisbane as well. I'm like, they're new, and they're new, and they're new. Because I used to live here, like, 10, 15 years ago. I've been on the coast, been on these coastlines for a while now. And I'm like, yeah, well, those surveillance cameras never used to be there. I'm like, are we moving to the Gold Coast or not? Anyway, it's interesting. Whether we do or not, and this is the thing, like, I've been very unattached this time, because every time I try to move, every time I do, I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. I'm like, I'm wasting time. Right? I don't feel that, but I'm just like, man, is this just another distraction? And I said to myself the other day, I'm like, no, you wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't a soul calling. Soul calling? Are you listening? Are you trusting yourself here? Honestly, we've both come alive thinking about the Gold Coast. There's ocean for me. I can surf, and the thing is that, like, I want to rollerblade. She wants to skateboard. Out there's only dirt roads, man. And then the bitumen road is an 80km/h road. Like, it's hills. It's not something we can just skate on. Like, we really are missing life. So what was the point of me sharing that? Yeah, it's unraveling the trauma. So I'm going to leave you with something to ponder on. And the reason why you stop yourself from trusting what you want is perhaps something came in and swiped you. For example, when I was living here, I didn't really have any direction in my life, didn't really know what I was doing. I was just living. I loved rollerblading and surfing. Well, I wasn't surfing back then. I was doing my mermaid thing under the water, but I was going to yoga. I was like, I loved living here. And I got sideswiped by a domestic violence situation, which, yes, I've learned much from, etc., etc. But ask yourself, when did I stop wanting what I wanted? When did I stop allowing myself, when did I stop, what's the question? Like, when did I stop giving myself what I wanted? When did I stop allowing myself to have fun? When did I stop letting in the light? When did I stop the things that I loved? And ask yourself why. Because sometimes there are some things that this is what happened in our life, and we don't realize. Like, for me, I was running away from the trauma. I was running away from domestic violence. Like I was literally, that's why I got up and moved to the coast in the first place, right? And it's like, even when I left home at 18, I was running away from the trauma. Well, I was maybe surviving in a way, right? So ask yourself, because I think a lot of people are depressed because we do shut ourselves down, right? I always talk about depression as crown chakra, and we shut off the light in our crown, right? Like, yes, that's a thing. When we close off the light, we get depressed because we're dark and we're pushing down our purpose rather than opening up and standing tall in what we want, which is our purpose, which is our destiny. So ask yourself, when did I stop allowing myself to have what I want? And why? Why did that happen? Now, you might not know straight away. Like I said, this whole process of, even when we looked at that last house and I came to the conclusion, I was like, you know what? Maybe our house just isn't ready yet. Maybe this just isn't the one. And I let it all go. And then all of a sudden, freaking landed at the Gold Coast. And I'm like, oh, why haven't we looked here before? And I'm like, oh, that's right. I did actually. When we first moved back to Queensland, and it just felt like blocked doors. And now I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Where is this going to lead? Because are we moving, or is this just something else to heal me and we're going to stay there? I don't know. I'm really unattached this time. Yeah, Lee says, I've been thinking about the Gold Coast so much lately. Interesting. Yes, you're welcome. That question is so deep, so self-confronting. And this is the thing. At third eye chakra, it is confronting. I want to say it. At all of them, it's confronting in a way. But here it's like the light. When did I stop having fun? When did I stop letting in the light? When did I stop wanting what I wanted? Why did I stop doing that? Oh, shit. Like for me, I'm like, oh yeah, I was at the Gold Coast and then I moved to the Sunshine Coast. Like, it's just been my story. Did I ever stop to question why I left the Gold Coast? Maybe once or twice, but did I go that deep with it? No. There's always a timing, and sometimes more information can come through. This is trusting the timing as well. Yeah? Wow, I've been feeling into that question so much lately. Ear chakras. So speaking of which, the ear chakra consciousness, we start diving deep on the 22nd of September. We're going 5 weeks, moving through each of these trainings. They are live trainings. There's 3 trainings a week. You have lifetime access. So if you can't make the live, don't stress about it. However, I'm doing them live because look at the magic that flows through when we're live. I really love doing it live, and to channel the entire ear chakra consciousness course live, I'm like, yes, please. So you can join us via the link or send me a message if you like details. There is another option for you to join. You can actually join through the Inner Circle. So the Inner Circle is a monthly membership that you get access to all my courses, you get access to all my meditations, you get access to the group trainings as well, and anything else that I release in there. There's hot seat mentoring, so you can be mentored by me in a group setting as well. So it is the Transcendence Reality Society. That is the Inner Circle for reality awareness, where you get access to everything that I release. So you can join us just for the 5 weeks, or you can join in for the 5 weeks and for everything else that comes through. There's no minimum time, there's no maximum time that you have to stay in the Inner Circle. You can just come in and join us for the ear chakra consciousness and experience the amazingness of Transcendence Reality Society, or you can just join us for the 5 weeks. Either one is there. So we start on the 22nd though, or if you want to work one-on-one with me, send me a message, because we can go deep, intuitively, personally guided via this intuitive, amazing flow that comes through with the most divine magic, working one-on-one. We do video calls, you've got unlimited access to me via Telegram, or there's lots of things, lots of psychic readings, whatever you need. But just being in that space can shift so much, as some of my clients experience. They're like, this is deep. I'm like, yeah, didn't we just start last week? Like, this is how it works. All right, I love you guys. Let your soul do what you want, and ask yourself, when did I stop letting myself do what I want? When did I stop allowing myself to have what I want? And why? And give yourself permission to have what you want once again. I love you.